Hey, my friends, it is another Friday, which means it's Building Wins Live. And, I love every day of the week, love everything I do, as you know, because one of my favorite things to say is love it, live it, own it, and love what I do and do what I love. And one of the best times of the week is when I get to do lives with some great, great guests. And today is no different. Brenda Clark Hamilton is somebody that I met a few weeks ago at a sales meeting. And she's a great speaker. It's got some great knowledge, some great stuff, and so we're going to be right back in just a minute. We're going to talk 30 minutes or so with Brenda, and I know you're going to love it. So don't go away. We'll be right back. And boom, here we are.
Hey, Randy, good to see you.
It's good to see you. At my age, it's good to be seen by anybody, so I'm just happy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, of course. So, yeah, it's great. As I'd mentioned just briefly in the intro, we met the first time, in late January? No, I mean not January. Late June, out in Spencer, Iowa, at a manufacturer that I represented for 1.5 million years, MWI Components, and you were the guest speaker at lunch. I don't know if you remember this before we get any further, but you do realize I almost stole one of your giveaway cups, right? You may not have caught it because I put it back in time.
I remember the other salespeople saying that you can eat a lot of candy without gaining weight, which they were irritated by.
Yes, well, that's because I walk 40 miles a day, but well, not 40, but I'm going to get 10 in before the day's out. I've got another 5 to go yet today. So, but no, you had those cups to give away to people had numbers under their chairs or something, if I remember right, and I thought they were probably for us sales guys because I'm a sales guy and I think everything's for me, right? And so I pull one over, and I've got it sitting in front of me, and all of a sudden I'm looking around and somebody said next to me goes, I don't think those are for us. And I'm looking around and I go, oops, maybe I should slide it back over. So luckily I didn't eat all the Hershey's in there or whatever it was. But so tell me first, Brenda, give us a little bit of the story of who's Brenda Clark Hamilton. Give us where you're from, what you do. I didn't say in the intro, which I meant to, but you're a keynote speaker, a workplace trainer, professional growth program, a teacher, coach. Give us the story before we get going here.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. As you said, my name is Brenda Clark Hamilton. I live in northern Iowa in a pretty rural area called Algona, Iowa, wonderful little town. I own my own business as a workplace trainer and a conference speaker, which means that I speak at about 100 events a year, which could be, it's all related to leadership, professional growth, motivation, personal excellence, maybe conflict in the workplace, how to have difficult conversations. And these presentations could be like at association conferences for any industry out there. I've probably spoken to every industry you could imagine at an association meeting. It could be at workplaces. Lots of times workplaces will say, will you we were just talking about possibly going out to Ohio to work with XYZ company. And so I've been doing this now for 17 years. I grew up on a farm in Northwest Iowa, west of a small town called Everly. Started as a high school English teacher and had no idea that there were conference speakers out there. And that is what I'm doing now and loving it. Have been loving it too.
Yeah, that's awesome. You and you do a great job. Like I mentioned, when you spoke at the sales meeting that I was at, I made a note that day, and I got your card because I said to myself, I talk to myself a lot, but I did say, occasionally I make sense even, but I said, I've got to get Brenda on the show because I just love the way you presented to the people. You're very interactive with everybody. You're not one of these folks that stand up at a podium and just lecture for 40 minutes. You're walking amongst the people, so to speak, and it was very well. So I enjoyed it. So thanks for coming on. So tell us a little bit. You've been doing this for 17 years, you said. I think. What are you finding out there in the world of leadership right now? Is it in demand? Is it something that people really, really need? I assume it's probably the demand is even more now than ever, I would guess, with all the stuff we've been going through the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's funny, Randy. Before COVID, it was crazy busy. And then when COVID hit, my business just dried up. Every day I would go, starting about I think my last program was literally like March 12th, 2020. And then every day I'd go to my computer and there would be a different email saying, I'm sorry, Brenda, we're going to have to cancel this conference. Right. And anyway, at some point, my husband's, I said to my husband after about, 8 months of this, should I be looking for a job? Honestly, right. Should I be looking? And he said, I think when it comes back, it will come back strong. And he indeed was right. My first quarter of 2022 was the busiest quarter I've ever had in 17 years. And I think, like you say, it's because things have been so abnormal that I think people are saying, if we can get back together, let's do it right. Let's get someone in here who can facilitate and make it a great experience for us.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you said that, because that would make sense to me that after all that time of being either locked out, let's face it, people are social, right? Generally, and not being able to go into work, not being able to hang out with your coworkers, not being able to meet and greet customers personally, whatever it is that you're doing, all of a sudden, after months, if not a year and a half of that, people just want to literally be with people, right?
Oh, they do. One of my favorite memories was in November. There was a bioethanol company that had the multiple location leaders in, Iowa and Minnesota get together at a historic hotel for a one-day retreat, and then we socialized that night. And I went to the restroom at one point in the afternoon. It was pretty early in the afternoon that the lunch had been delayed in arriving. And I came back to the room and just woke this visual and this sound of spontaneous socialization and laughter and joy. And it was like, oh, I missed it. Yeah, and I think we all felt that there was just, later the meeting planner said, our lunch was delayed by an hour due to a catering error. And he said, it's kind of a blessing in disguise because everybody socialized that entire time. And it was just wonderful to feel that.
Oh, exactly. That was the biggest thing. And that I missed being a 4+ decade, which is a long time, road warrior. I just say 4+ decade, Brenda, because 40+ years sounds like a long time. And if I use 4+ decades, I think I started at 12 and I've only been doing it for exactly 40 years, which both are a little wrong. But it being a social creature that I think all of us guys in sales, guys and girls in sales are. That was a challenge. And maybe walk back to, if you could, when this whole thing happened and you started to go down that road with all of a sudden one day, right? It cancel. Did you start developing some programs you could do more online, more Zooms, more team meetings? What did you do for that year and a half that you couldn't really go out and speak like you're used to doing?
Yeah, you are exactly right. I mean, the first few months, it was, everything, just dominoes with all the spring conference events that I was speaking at in April and May and June, they all went down. And then I think it was about the middle of June. One of the first customers who called was Iowa Workforce Development, which, if you can remember, lots of people went on unemployment at that time. Mm-hmm. They had claims like you wouldn't believe. And they had staff. The director from Iowa called and he said, we have staff working 7 days a week. They're scared to death about getting COVID. Could you do a virtual program for them on taking care of themselves, even when they're busy? And it was one of the first virtual. And after that, it was just a number of companies, state governments, this and that said, well, let's do things virtually. And so, yeah, I did that all until I can't remember. Shortly after the vaccine became available, a couple months after that, then those live events came back steadily. But yeah, okay. I learned a lot about Zoom trainings, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that was one of the things I guess I want to ask about is, so now you're back in front of people all the time. Most of the time, are you finding yourself still doing some Zooms and still doing virtual also? Is it kind of a hybrid, if you will, or is it pretty much all in person now?
I would say from a speaker standpoint, most of it, 95% at this point is in person. However, the large national conferences and some of your larger state agencies are still playing it safe. I'm with a States Public Health Association. Just in like 3 weeks, we just had a conference call, and they're virtual for, I think, the third, fourth year in a row, that
Really?
They just said, as a public health organization, we just couldn't risk having it in person, and we set the example. But most of it is in person, although, again, at the national level, those national conferences are still quite hesitant to open it up.
Are they? Okay. Yeah, I've seen the last year and a half in my world for a long time. Well, we had close to a year and a half, almost 2 years maybe, of no trade shows, no association shows, no nothing, right? And it was funny. Everybody, I think, wondered in my industry, when we finally open these up again, will people come or will they not come? And I don't know if my industry, the post frame and metal roofing industry, I don't know if we're just unique, but people, just like we talked earlier, they flooded to it. The shows were I think everybody had enough, and everybody had enough of just staying away from everybody. And I'm not saying that people weren't cautious, but it's like we're going to the show, and we're going to see people, and we're going to shake hands, and we're going to bro hug, and we're going to get back to normal. And
well, National SHRM, which is the HR, huge, so they have theirs in person. So I'm not saying all of them are,
right.
But I hear that more from speakers bureaus saying, that we'll get back eventually to full time. But I think people are excited to be back in person.
Well, the good news is, with what you learned, to be able to do more Zoom, more virtual type activities, now you have that option to do that when you need to, when you can, when you have to. And if, God forbid, some other goofy thing comes around the corner someday, which we hope not for sure, but you don't have to relearn it, right? It's there. If you had to turn it on, you turn it on, right?
Right. And there's a number of different, Zoom is one, there's Teams, there's, Ring Central, a whole bunch. They all are so similar that you can pretty much move in and out of them. And it's kind of like riding a bike once you get on there.
Oh, once you are, yeah. Once you get on, it's. I still remember the first time I was on a Zoom. First place I couldn't figure out how to get on the Zoom, but when I finally got on, it was the old. What was that TV show the Brady Bunch? Remember when they had them all? Yeah, that's exactly my thought. Is this is just weird? I got all these people here, and and I couldn't see everybody because nobody bothered to explain that. Well, just slide the screen over, right? There's more people. I'm just thinking that's all there is, and I'm hearing people talk that aren't there, and I go, I want to be one of those that nobody sees me right now, but I didn't know what to do. But it's it's interesting. We learned a lot out of that. So. You go, so you do actual speaking, keynote speaking. Talk about the workplace training. So you actually go in and work with companies for a period of time other than just an hour speech, right?
Yes, it's very common. Like I said, we're kind of in a rural part of Iowa, which I think you're somewhat familiar with. We have, for instance, a lot of ag industries, a lot of manufacturing facilities, and the nature of a lot of those organizations in the Midwest is that people are promoted from within. And so they may be a frontline worker, and they're a great worker, they're great at what they do, they pick up on things quickly. So they're promoted to supervisor or manager without having had any training in that. And I hear that really from all industries across the nation, that this happens so frequently. And so that's a lot of companies will say, could we set up a series of leadership trainings for our people? And the beauty is I can come on site, either drive or fly, come on site. If we're flying, obviously we do it more for a couple of days training and schedule it that way. But it's something where they can get training that's tailored to them as well. That before I ever speak in an event, I've had a lengthy call with the meeting planners or HR or the plant manager or whatever to get a feel for, what their atmosphere is like, what are some common issues they might deal with. So yeah, it's really a win-win, I think, for both of us. I enjoy the work and they enjoy the fact that someone is coming in who really, lots of times people will say, it's as if she works here, and it's like, I'm not magical. I have talked to your people behind the scenes ahead of time, and I've had a feel for what you are.
Right. So you're taking what is probably, I don't know what the percentage would be, but probably 70%, I don't know, I'm just picking a number of what you would train is going to be the same for a lot of different types of organizations, but then you're taking and making it for this specific company only because you've done some research and you've talked to people, you know what they need, what they're missing, and you really tailor it to that particular group is what you're saying. Sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. Lake Okoboji in Iowa, I was up with a group of 40 mortgage bankers from the Midwest a few weeks ago. And yeah, I mean, we talked ahead of time and he said, this is a retreat. You know, we want to have some fun. We want to have some team building. We want to have some reminders of being great with internal customer service. So I just take down those notes and say, okay, I'll put it together and we show up and we do it. And it's something I really enjoy. And I think, you know, we always get good feedback that they feel like this was what we wanted, but it comes from listening to the customer, of course. Just like any good salesperson does. You listen.
Listening. When you hit that, exactly. Listening is, you know, in whether it's in the leadership role or in the sales world, which I would tend to argue is still a leadership role because you got to lead the process, right? And help the customer get where they want to get. Help them tell you what you want, what they need. But the listening is so key in all aspects. So you spend some time teaching people, I assume, because that's a learned thing, right? I mean, we all like to talk more than we like to listen, right?
Well, and Randy, I grew up in a family of talkers. I mean, we have 3 sons in all their 20s, and they know the Clarks, my family, they're over communicators. You know, if we're having a dinner, Randy, we will have called you 17 times and sent out 3 emails and 4 texts. So you know, and the Hamiltons, my in-laws, are under communicators. And so anyway, I had never been a good listener at all. And how I learned that skill was a long time ago, like you. My second year in college, I was chosen to be a peer advising leader as a sophomore to freshman incoming students. And Dr. Lou Agnesi, who was a dean of student affairs, actually taught us, the pals, the peer advising leaders himself, because he thought it was that important. And he taught us how to listen. And the fact that when we listen to people and are truly focused and engaged, that we show care and respect for them. And as someone who grew up in a family of talkers, it was like, that never occurred to me. And I know that sounds strange, but I realized there's a lot of other people who grew up like I did and didn't understand the fact that, like, as a leader or as a salesperson, a huge part of your job is listening to what they have to say, empathizing, asking appropriate follow-up questions. There was even a very quirky study, Randy, and I know you've been married forever like I have, but they had done a study. Harvard had done a study, interesting, the last couple of years, that had people pair up for a 15-minute conversation. And they primed one of them, said, I want you to ask a lot of follow-up questions. A follow-up question like, we just got back from vacation. And Randy might say, where'd you go? How was it? Those follow-up questions. So they said to them, we want you to ask that person several follow-up questions. The other group, they just said to the person, we want you to ask just a couple of follow-up questions. And then what they did, of course, this was Harvard, they analyzed the data and found that the best liked people were those who asked the most follow-up questions, who showed interest in that person. Now, this is where the dating things comes, Randy. So you can share this with whoever needs dating advice. I don't know Wes's history, our producer, but maybe Wes needs this. I don't know. But Harvard's follow-up was...
I see Wes back there. He's nodding his head. He does.
Harvard's follow-up to that is they actually did speed dating and had asked few follow-up questions in the speed dating or the most follow-up questions, a lot. They found that people asked on the most return dates were those who asked the most follow-up question, which again gets back to that showing interest in others.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting. Yeah, Wes is a lifetime experienced married guy, so he believe me, he married well out of his league. So I think he asked a lot of questions, some good questions. Anyway, I met his lovely wife and kids, so Wes done well for himself. But you know, you talked about dating, and that's an interesting thing because you think about sales. Just bump over to that for just a second. Not asking questions, or really where I want to go, I guess, is everybody thinks that they're not in sales, right? Unless they have the title salesman, salesperson, sales rep, whatever the case is. I challenge people when I talk to them is that I don't care what you do. We're all in sales. Everybody's in sales. And you hit on it when you talk about dating. And maybe take this a little bit more if you would, but if you're a young guy, young girl, or older, whatever the case may be, and as a guy and you see this girl sitting at the pub and oh man, I'd like to know her. You got a sales job to do, buddy, right? I mean, it's
You do.
right.
Well, it's everything. Kids from when they're little, they learn how to sell mom and dad on why I need such and such toy in Target, even though we didn't come here to buy a toy.
Mm-hmm.
The more, I think if people can learn to be persuasive communicators, it's a benefit to every aspect of your life. But I like the dating analogy. That indeed is selling yourself.
Exactly. When you think about it, you could even go as far as pastoring a church. You're doing a sales job if you think about it. I mean, you've got to convince the people not only to support the causes, support the groups, to get involved, to believe in general, right? I mean, it's everything we do, and I like to get guys that are working and they say, "Oh, I'm just a crew guy. I don't sell. That's not my job." Well, yeah, you're in sales because you're the guy that the customer sees every day for 7 days while you're out there building that building, right? So you might not see the salesman again. You may not see him until he comes to collect, or however that process works in any given organization. But you're seeing that crew every day, and if you're how you doing? This is what we're going to do today. You talk the guy up. I'm sorry, but that's sales 101, right?
Yeah, I often talk when we talk about customer service, if I'm doing a training with any industry on customer service, is you have to talk about the value of that internal customer service or sales, whatever you want to call it, how important it is. There was a study, I think it was out of University of Baltimore, don't quote me on that, but said basically that if you take any company's score for internal customer service, for how people within the company, their vendors and whatnot, feel like they are treated by each other. And you take that same company's score for external customer service, how their outside customers perceive the quality of the services, they're almost always indistinguishable. And I always remind groups, that if you think, oh, I could be super, super sweetsy nice to the outside customer and be not communicating, not barking orders at your colleague, the ball gets dropped. That tension is felt. It has that impact. So I agree. We're all in customer service or sales. And I don't care if you're in frontline manufacturing or a bank teller or whatever, you are in sales and part of that sales reputation of your entire company.
Exactly. Spot on. So let's talk about the you have professional growth programs, and that's we've probably sort of touched on that because that's involved with the workplace training. But so you actually are going in with the typically maybe the higher level management or mid level management, people that want to move up, and really teaching and training and helping them to be better managers, right? I mean, that's the concept. I gotta believe.
Absolutely. And it could be, very, very practical hands-on things. I'm often asked to do how to hold people accountable. I was at a the statewide conservation conference in Des Moines last week, and they wanted a session. They're all conservation people. They love the outdoors. They love the environment, but then they have to supervise this team of people. And it's not their thing. And so went in there and spent an hour and a half talking about, the basics of making sure you set clear expectations for your people, what you expect of them, doing ongoing coaching and feedback and communication, the importance of praising them, of thanking them. And then how do you sit down with an employee who's underperforming? And what are the first words that should or shouldn't come out of your mouth? All the way down to having that conversation. So sometimes it's very practical things like that. Sometimes probably one of my most often requested programs in leadership is the mentally strong leader, which is how do you stay resilient? No one wants a leader who you're riding the emotional roller coaster with them, depending on which version of Randy showed up today. Right. No one likes that. And there are some actual strategies that you can use to be mentally strong. One simple one, it's Eric Barker. He says, every day you should say, "Arg," like a pirate.
Yeah.
And what he says is that every day at the start of the day, you should use those 3 letters and think of the A of ARG is anticipate. What is something I'm looking forward to today or this week? Even if you have to set something, what that is. R, recollect, play back in your mind the good things that have happened. And G, tell what you're grateful for. I'm grateful for this. I'm thankful for this. What those three things do, they make you train your brain to focus on the positive, to not go down the rabbit hole of everything's wrong in my life and everything's terrible, but they keep you upbeat to keep you with a can-do attitude when you work with your people. So that's one of many strategies, but it's just a simple say arg every day to keep yourself as a leader mentally strong. One other postscript to that, some hospitals, because the power of gratitude, saying what you're thankful for every day, whether that's saying in your head every day 3 things you're thankful for, or even better, jotting down and specific things. Like, I'm thankful for ice cold water. I'm thankful for coffee in the morning. I'm thankful for that the trees are just starting to change a little bit, and I know it's going to be pretty. But anyway, the gratitude is so powerful for energy. They found children do better on problem solving if they focus on what they're thankful first. Well, during COVID, a number of hospital teams that I worked with got in the habit at the start of every shift, when they did their huddle as a department, of starting with, what are we thankful for today? And each person would say something personally thankful, just to keep them mentally strong to go back into COVID, versus have they started with, let's all complain about how bad it is. Yeah, there was plenty to complain about.
Right.
But let's keep ourselves strong. So anyway, that's the gist of leadership. Could be real practical things like how to supervise people, or the mentally strong leader, or the concept of servant leadership, a number of things like that.
Well, and I like that concept, because, and you talk about gratitude, and that's something that it gets talked about, I guess, more today maybe than it used to, but probably not enough, is we forget that everybody, and we can all fall into that from the day to day, is you hate everything. This happened, this happened, this happened. And I've always felt like, 20 minutes of suck is not 20 days or 20 years, it's 20 minutes, right? It might be more than 20 minutes, but I think you got to isolate that back to, this happened. That doesn't mean my whole life now sucks. That doesn't mean my job sucks. It doesn't mean this company sucks. Just this one item may suck, right? But you gotta, and I think that's key, right? Is to, and a good leader will help his people, her people, to be able to put that aside, compartmentalize that, and say, okay, that bad thing happened. We lost that order. COVID hit. Whatever it was that we went through, but good leaders probably did a great job of talking about, like you just said, gratitude, what we're thankful for. Hey, we're still here. We still have a job. Life is still kind of okay, right?
Yeah, I think people underestimate how much people look toward their leaders to see how bad things is. One of my favorite memories, I mean, favorite, which is kind of odd, but it taught me a lesson, was several years ago when our boys were young. We were on vacation out in Estes Park, Colorado. And the boys were school age, young little guys, in the back seat of our minivan. And we got a flat tire a couple miles out of Estes. And, husband said, crap, Brenda, we got a flat tire. And I said to the boys, we got a flat tire, just so you know. And I looked back, and the three of them had wide-eyed, like, does this mean vacation is over?
Oh. Right.
They never had a flat tire. Do we have to go home now? We're going to cancel our hotel reservations. Does this mean no swimming in the pool tonight? And within a minute, my husband said, boys, no big deal. We'll have this fixed shortly. We'll be back on the road. And they went, okay. And went back to their little video games, whatever. And I think we need to remember, as leaders, while we don't want to lie to our people, we certainly don't want to always go to, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is the worst. We want to demonstrate that can-do attitude. Right. And I think, nurses especially, I have been taught by so many of them that are directors of nursing and whatnot, that it's a part of their being, that they have to be that positive, upbeat can-do. They don't have an option to be otherwise, because their team needs it so much.
Exactly. Yeah, the can-do part and really managing expectations is huge. I find a lot of times in the sales world, I'm not always going to deliver exactly what you wanted because of some outside factor, freight issues, truck issues. In the last 2 or 3 years, the supply chain issues has been terrible. But if you manage expectations up front with people, it's never as bad than if you just don't tell them, you don't manage that, and then all of a sudden, if the truck doesn't show up. If I know it's not going to show up, the sooner I tell you the bad news, right? And I think in any instance, whether it's personal or a family, personal or whatever, the sooner you deliver that less than perfect information and you do it with an attitude of gratitude, as you said, look, things are still okay, but here's where we're at right now. The sooner you do that, right, everybody's just going to be happier and better off. Am I right?
And
Or
I
am I
think
missing?
as a salesperson, it builds trust.
Mm-hmm.
When, I think that's how people grow to know, Randy, that if we have another problem, I can trust working with Randy because he's going to be honest. He's going to communicate it. I don't feel like he's trying to pull the wool over my eyes. I think that's how we develop long-term client relationships, is
Exactly.
that communication and honesty about the situation. I often tell people, if you're working with customers in any regard, you never want to just, or coworkers, you never want to just say the flat no.
Right.
You always want to say, well, we can't do that, but here's some options of what we can do. And I think the more we get into that habit in our personal and professional lives, the better off we will be.
Oh, exactly. I've had some situations. It's funny you say that because there's always the next question, or there's always the next answer. And I think we all detest that one word answer, no.
Yeah.
Like, when is did my order ship? No. There's another question, right? When is it? I find myself doing that. Like, well, okay, if it didn't, maybe why didn't it? But more importantly, when is it going to? But it's like if you have to pull teeth to get that information, you get madder by the question, right? Or if you just start out with, "Hey, Brenda, I'm sorry, I couldn't have screwed this up if I tried any worse than we did, but it did not make the truck. Here's why. But here's what we're going to do about it. I shipped out party order yesterday. Whatever the circumstances are." And it's all of a sudden the fact that it took ownership, and I think that's a key. Maybe we'll end on a little bit about ownership. But if you take ownership of it, you apologize for it, you keep a positive attitude and say, here is what I'm going to do, however, rather than just going back. Like I said, I've heard so many times in my life, no, it didn't ship. And I'm standing there going, waiting, and there's nothing. Then when you got to ask the next question, I'm getting mad now already as a customer, right? I got that part. It's not shipped, but what's going on? So what about ownership? Let's finish up with that because you've been kind of your time, but talk about ownership. We have to take ownership in our jobs, right? In our professions and what we do, and especially as leaders. What's the Brenda take on ownership? Because I love that theory.
Well, I just think, I like to even think of one of my favorite is ownership even over our mood. One of my favorite quotes is, please be aware of the energy you bring into this room. I think we have to be take responsibility for our actions, for our words, for what we didn't say that we should have, for what we did say that we shouldn't have. And I also think a big thing to me is ownership of what kind of aura you bring into work and life. I often tell people, to check your energy level before you enter your building in the morning. Before you grab that door, stop and say, what am I bringing in here? One of my favorite concepts is, am I bringing in mojo or no-jo? And it's from Marshall Goldsmith, who says, mojo is, I'm here, I'm ready to go, we can do this, I'm grateful to have a good job, grateful to work all with you, I'm going to try to put in an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. Or no-jo, which is everything's terrible. I hate working here, hate my job, hate my life. And I think for all of us, to me, ownership means taking ownership of what you're bringing into work, and I think what you bring into your home life as well. If you go home every day, real quickly, because I know we need to wrap up.
No, we're fine.
One company that I was working with had me in Indiana just a couple months ago doing leadership work all day. And at the end of the day, when we said, what are some takeaways? We went through each person. One of the men said, it occurred to me that I'm a location leader here for this company. He said, I am Mr. Mojo all day long. I'm wonderful. I'm flexible. I'm positive. I'm complimentary. I'm can-do, Mr. Listen. And he said, I go home to my wife and daughters, who I claim to love more than anything in the world, and I'm Mr. Mojo. And he said, I'm going to stop and check myself at the door and take ownership for who I am and the choices I make. And so to me, that's part of ownership, an important part.
Well, it is, and that's interesting you bring that up because nobody, some may say nobody, some may be better than others, but I don't think anybody is perfect at drawing that line between work and home. They go back and forth, right? They're intertangled, regardless of whether you say, I just have a job, and when I leave at 5 o'clock, I'm done. Well, maybe you're done with the responsibilities for the day. You're not going to get a phone call at night, but all that happened today, you got to guard against. I think what you just said, you take that home with you, that makes your home life that evening bad, and then as that gets bad, you take that back with you at 8 o'clock in the morning to work, and it's this revolving door of not good, right?
Absolutely. And I think people need to say, if you are in a job, a company, an organization where it's just constant, you're trying so hard to bring mojo, you're trying, and you're just beating your head against the wall, and you've tried to change what you can. I think sometimes you need to ask yourself, is the poison this place is entering into my life and taking to my family and whatnot, because I just can't help it? Is it worth it? Or should I be considering other options? Which again goes back to ownership of,
exactly.
Do I say, well, I couldn't help it. I had to work for this awful company for 35 years. I think there's almost always options of some sort.
Twice options. Beautiful. So should ask questions as we wrap this up now. What did I miss today that you're sitting there for the last 12 minutes going, okay, Randy, when are you going to ask this question? I know I missed something. I had to. Or maybe
there
I'm just
really
brilliant.
Wasn't anything specific, but I guess if you could share, do you have 2 minutes for a quick story?
Oh, absolutely.
Story
love it. I got 5 minutes.
What I think is a good, sometimes I close at a speaking event with, because I think it's a good one. Sometimes if you have someone in the audience who says, gosh, I'd like to go on my own and do things like Randy and Brenda do, but it's kind of scary and whatnot. Well, it was how I actually started my business after I had thought about doing this for many years. We decided when I turned 40, which was 17 years ago, that I would launch this business. My husband and I said, it's a good time. Kids are good age. If you have to travel income-wise, we can do this. And so I created some brochures on my home computer saying I could go to your business and do training on XYZ. Here's my experience. And I identified within like an hour of our small town what might be 10 or 15 companies that might have enough funds to hire a workplace trainer to come in. And so I had this sitting on the counter. It was September of 2005. And I was ready to launch my big dream business I've been thinking about for 10, 15 years. And I started crying. And my husband said, why are you crying? Aren't you excited? You're going to be sending out your brochures tomorrow, launching this business. This is your dream, Brenda. You've been wanting to do this for 10 years. Aren't you excited? And I said, Chris, I just feel so out there. I said, tomorrow, I'm going to send these brochures out to people I know around town. And I said, what if they look at it and say, what a dumb idea? Or who does she think she is? I said, worse yet, I send them out. No one answers. No one responds. And my whole big dream just fizzles into nothing. I don't want to send them out. And he said, you don't have to. You can put them in a drawer. You can throw them away. I don't care what you do with those brochures. He said, but I got a question for you before you do that. He said, can you live with not knowing what might have happened had you sent them out?
Right.
He said, you're 40. Chances are you got a few good years left in you. Can you go through the day every day for the next 40 years, not knowing what might have happened? Had you put these in the mail? And ultimately, after lots of tears and prayer and whatnot, I came out of the bedroom and said, I have to know.
Yep.
And I did. I put them into the post office box. The next morning, my hands were literally shaking. And within a day or two, got a call from our very local, here in our small town, utility company. Did workplace training with them and other local companies for 2 years. And then got my foot in the door to speak in Des Moines. And that's when things just really went big. But I would encourage people to say, can you live with not knowing? If you have a lifestyle change you want to make, if you have a dream you want to pursue, because sometimes if that nagging is in there, there might be something there bigger than you could possibly imagine.
Exactly. And what you just did is practice something I talk about sometimes, which is you didn't wait for perfect, because perfect never comes, right? At some point, you knew you had something to offer. And at some point, you got to jump off the 84th 84th floor and learn to fly on the way down, right? At some point.
So that's such a great phrase. What do you say? Don't wait for perfect?
You don't wait for perfect, because perfect never comes. If you wait for perfect, there is no such thing as perfect. There's the search for excellence, right? But and you may find excellence on your way to perfect. But in my opinion, there is no perfect, because that's a moving ball. It's a moving bar. It'll keep getting. You could. Tom Brady, arguably, because I'm a Michigan guy, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback ever. But I'm getting Wes in the background with some. I don't Wes, but he's a Buckeye. I can't help it. I still love him. But Tom Brady is not perfect, right? He's excellent. Excellent as far as the world of quarterbacking, but perfect would be he's never had an interception. Every single pass was completed, right? So there's no such thing as perfect. You keep striving for excellence, and you keep getting better. And at some point in time, I did a little post. I'm going to wrap up because I've taken way more of your time, but I did a post the other day. The thinker, the guy that sits on the statue, does the thinking. There's the thinker, and then there's the doer. And the doer is just steps with him walking away. And I try to think about that from a standpoint of, you do need to think. I'm not saying just go crazy and just run off without any thought. But while you're still thinking and waiting for perfect, the doer has went and done it, made mistakes, screwed up, fell down, fixed them, started from a new spot, move forward. The thinker's still sitting there going, I'm going to take 12 more courses and read 96 more books and 19 more podcasts, and then I'll be ready, right? Well, they're waiting for something that can never exist, which is perfect. So
that is so true. I mean, I'm just thinking every day, I feel like I'm extremely happy and joyful, but I do not have a perfect life, and neither do you, Randy. No. If we were waiting for perfect to be happy, wow.
There's only one person. There's only one person that has a perfect life, and that's hashtag Dixie Chick, because my wife, has a perfect life because she's with me.
Oh.
See, I was just a reason to get Wes to put up the hashtag the Dixie Chick. That was the only reason I said that. It is, isn't it? It is. Well, Brenda, thank you so much for coming on. It was as awesome as I expected it would be. Your first class. And just listen, reach out to Brenda if you can use her anywhere in the country. Right? They can reach you at BrendaClarkHamilton.com. That's probably the best. You're on LinkedIn and Facebook, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And there's a contact form on my website. But thank you, Randy, so much for having me. It's just been a delight to talk to you. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Oh, we could. We could talk for hours. And I appreciate you being on, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Everybody have a great day.
Yeah. Cheers. All right. Brenda Hamilton Clark Hamilton, excuse me, I'll get it right. Anyways, incredibly good stuff right there. I hope you enjoyed that. Reach out to her if you can use her, and in your businesses, in your sales organizations, wherever, whenever. I can tell you, first class. I sat through a chat with her at MWI, as I said a few months ago, and first class lady. So reach out to her. So what are we going to do? Let's do another show next week, right? Let's build wins again. We do it every week. Next week, we're going to go really back to the industry with an old friend of mine, Bill Bowser. Bill is a co-owner in a company called Scott Systems, and they do the post-rack pole barn shelving. It is specifically designed for the post frame industry, which, as you all know, is something I'm very actively involved with. And so we're going to chat next week with Bill. He's going to tell us how he got started. He's a vet. It's a vet-owned business, which I'm very fond of. And you're gonna love that little chat about post-rack, and that makes some sense for you. So come see us next week. Until then, remember, we just talked about it a little while ago, but live it, love it, own it. And do what Wes and I and Brenda do, which is we love what we do and do what we love. And that's super important. And if you're not, at some point in time, and Wes talks about this a lot in some of his podcasts, and Brenda brought it up today, if you just can't get to a point where you're loving what you do and doing what you love, you got to think about something else. Just saying. And with that, remember, I think you ought to go make today your best day ever. Look at that. Looks like a doctor wrote that. Make your day today your best day ever. Until tomorrow. Cheers, my friends.